December. Piper Cherokee 140. Private pilot. Single engine land. Two siblings, Dwayne and Ellie, decided to go surprise their mother for her 50th birthday. Ellie just acquired her private pilot's license and was excited to get up in the air with her older brother, who had 270 hours of flying time.
So I'm pretty excited to see Mom for her 50th.
Yeah, same. She's gonna be so surprised. I can't believe you came up with such a great idea to fly over there and surprise her.
Yeah, well, you know, you just got your license. You should go for a little flight.
Yeah. We should fly more often, brother.
Sure thing, sister.
Are you gonna fly the way back?
Yeah, I think so. It's gonna be at night.
All right.
That crosswind was pretty crazy, eh?
Oh yeah. So happy we made it. At least the winds will be calm later today.
Dwayne and Ellie were in high spirits after just completing their successful flight from Norman to Ardmore. They successfully surprised their mother for her 50th birthday. At 8:15 p.m., with the party winding down, Dwayne called flight service and got a weather briefing.
Hello, and thank you for calling the Regional Pilot Information Line. For flight service plan, press 1. For weather service information, press 2. Good night, this is Bill Weather Information.
Hello, sir. Can I just get a weather brief for the Oklahoma area?
Yes, sir, just to inform you, the weather is 1 hour and a half cold. There is a revision on the forecast for our area at the moment.
I'll still take a weather brief, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, it was forecast on the VFR weather. On the other hand, there was a temperature and dew point spread of only 1 degree Celsius.
All right. So how does it seem for VFR flights?
It seems pretty good, but like I said, there's a temperature and dew point spread of only 1 degree Celsius.
All right. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Have a good flight.
Thanks.
At 9:10 p.m., their sister Luann dropped them off at Ardmore Airport. The weather was still very much VFR, and so they were airborne by 9:35.
All right, let's get back home.
All right. Let's go, Ellie. Wow, it's a beautiful night, Ellie.
Yeah, the stars are just intoxicating.
It's a good thing we're not intoxicated.
Yep. I'd like to get back home so I could study for my exams. How long would you say we'd be there, brother?
Not too sure. Probably 40, 45 minutes.
All right, sounds good. Maybe I could take a little nap. Look at the moon. Wow.
That's a full moon.
Oh, beautiful.
Are we in fog, sis?
It looks like it, Dwayne. I don't know.
Oh, it's
The
pretty...
forecast said clear VFR, eh?
We'll just keep going.
All right. We're almost halfway there anyways.
getting a little worried. Can you tune in Okie City approach?
Sure thing.
Okie City approach, this is Cherokee November 1 Kilo Echo. We're on a VFR flight to U of Okie Westheimer, about 40 south of Victor 163 at 3,000 feet and squawking 12.
Roger, 37 Hotel. The altimeter is 29907 and falling. Say request.
Oh, it's getting pretty foggy. I don't know if we can stay VFR much longer.
Okay. Understand, you're going IFR. Squawk 2347 and ident.
Squawking 2347 ident.
Radar contact. Be advised that 2 small aircraft missed the approach at Westheimer within the past 10 minutes. Please say your intention, sir.
Well, I think we'd like to keep heading for Westheimer, sir. That's home, and we gotta get this bird back home.
Roger. Stay on your present heading and maintain 3,000. You can plan on the runway 3 localizer approach. How much room will you need for your turn at the Sooner?
Sir, I don't have any approach plates. This is a VFR flight. We just got caught up in this stuff. It came up all around us suddenly with no warning. Wasn't even in the forecast.
No problem. Localizer frequency is 111.1. Intercept is at 2,500 feet. The MDA is 1620. I can give you vectors for the intercept if you'll tell me how much room you'd like. Descend now at your discretion to 2.5 and report reaching sooner. We'll be coming up in 15 miles.
Dwayne signed off without giving the controller an answer. He had begun his IFR rating 2 years prior. However, he had never completed it. This gave him just enough knowledge of IFR flying to lead a seasoned air traffic controller into thinking he had the rating. But this was no practice session. There was no hood. This was the real thing, and he was scared stiff.
Cherokee, you just went through the localizer. Say your intentions.
Approach, can't shoot the localizer approach. We have no plates for the miss. We'd rather find a VFR airport.
Say your fuel. The closest VFR with a full ILS approach is up north around Machia. The fog has moved in and stayed in over a broad area. Your best bet for now is probably Will Rogers. They're showing 402. The ILS will get you in with 200 and a half, so you'd have room to spare. Everyone who missed at Westheimer got in okay.
Sounds good. We'll need an ILS frequency out there.
It'll be the 3-5 right approach. Frequency is 110.9. Turn left heading 250 and climb to 3,000. You're only 7 from the marker. That's Galley. Expect a tight right turn in 4 miles.
The Cherokee started the left turn and began climbing. It reached 2,800 feet and continued turning past the 250-degree assigned heading. Before the controller could say anything, the Cherokee's left turn suddenly tightened into a spiral, and the altitude started falling, then dropping, then diving. The controller never said a word. Dwayne was struggling, wrenching the control wheel. Ellie tried to push the yoke forward and to the right to stop the spiraling rotation, but she couldn't overcome his overpowering strength.
What are you doing? What are you doing, Shane? No.
Immediately following the crash, search and rescue began searching for the aircraft.
Here in Oklahoma, we just found remains of parts of an airplane that just crashed. It's a Cherokee 140. We're still finding parts. No survivors found, but so far it's looking like it's pilot error based off of what we've heard from the controller and basically how he went down. Immediately we have two main reasons why our investigation is pointing towards pilot error. Number one is the pilot in command did not file a flight plan for a night cross country. Even though it was only a 42-minute flight, it's still dangerous, and it's proper discipline to file these flight plans. If he would have done so, he would have gotten an updated weather brief. The second reason is that he misled the controller into believing that he was instrument rated when he was not. So the pilot is the only one who knew that he was in trouble. Nobody else did. If they would have said they weren't IFR rated, the controller could have given him different directions. But further investigation will take place, and we will keep the public informed.
The aviation world is under a microscope when it comes to any sort of crash, especially when there's a fatality involved. Every party involved covers their bases to not only avoid blame, but to offer the utmost amount of safety for every flight. Air traffic controller representatives Phyllis Gervais, R. Jeremy, and Levanti present their official statements and concerns about the accident in question.
We hate losing people in airplanes, and we hate losing controllers. But it's part of this job. All the soul searching in the world won't change it that much. What's so unfortunate about this accident is that the controller blamed himself so totally, even though the pilot had every little chance of landing safely. Based on his limited IFR experience and the conditions that prevailed that evening. As a matter of fact, the controller actually gave them their best option, the ILS at Will Rogers. So if anything, he came closest to saving their lives.
If you listen to the tapes and study the transcripts carefully, it isn't difficult to see where the confusion came in about the pilot's instrument capabilities. He'd had some IFR training. Not that much, and not that recently, but enough to know the radio procedures. His tone of voice, the things he said, all sounded like they were coming from an IFR pilot. The acknowledgements, too. He accepted the vectors and agreed to both approaches. That was plenty convincing.
If you think about it, you'll agree that the controller had only two possible choices anyway. He could handle the flight IFR, or his emergency situation requiring a flight assist. But because of the weather and the widespread low ceilings in Viz, both procedures would have been very similar. The best alternative was still the ILS at Will Rogers, either by instruments or talk down. One other part of the transcripts can make you think the controller should have known right away that the pilot was not IFR rated. That was the business of the missing approach plates. But that's not all that uncommon or unusual either. Lots of IFR pilots fly VFR without hauling along their charts and plates, especially on short trips like this one. I'd venture that an average controller gives out approach plate information several times a year. We don't make a big deal out of it. That's about it. The NTSB spent a lot of time with the transcripts and focused on how the controller handled the flight, and whether or not anything he did contributed to the accident. When they got all through, they came to the conclusion that what the controller did or tried to do was the closest anything came to saving those two people. Now we wish we could convince the controller of that. He still blames himself and still doesn't want to go back to being a controller. That's a rather sad aftermath of this case.
Flight Service Representative Yanisha Juan Almeida discusses how oversights can occasionally happen.
The weather briefing the pilot got was complete, as far as we know. When the pilot called in at 8:15, the first thing he was told was that the weather he had been getting was over an hour old. There had been a system delay because of a major revision in the forecast for that part of the country. The briefer went ahead and gave him the weather, knowing that it was being updated and likely would be very different from what he had then. He claimed that the pilot asked for it, and that's probably true, but in my opinion, he shouldn't have given it. There were too many things about it that made it potentially dangerous for a VFR flight. For instance, the temperature and dew point spread was only 1 degree. That's too much for close comfort at night. In Oklahoma, and in December, even seasoned IFR pilots take special precautions when they get spread like that, because they know that if it comes together, they'll be looking at very low IFR, and very often conditions that are below IFR minimums, especially in the early evening when the air is cooling down. And that's exactly what was happening on the night of the accident. In fact, that's probably why the air forecasts were being revised at the time. Our official position is that the pilot received a complete briefing, should have called back, but didn't, and took off on a VFR 9. Apparently the briefer never told the pilot that VFR flight was not recommended. That's our official language for warning, and should have been included in strong emphasis in the briefing, but it wasn't. And the fact that it wasn't makes us suspicious of the briefer's report. Now if you're wondering why I'm telling you all this, keep in mind that we run the best system of its kind in the world, and we take special pride in that. All of us, we also realize that we're human and that oversights can occasionally happen. And when they do happen, we want to correct them. All of us do. So we hate cover-ups of any kind and from anyone, even from our own people. That's why you got this earful, and I hope you treat it with discretion in your report, so you'll help us improve our system. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
23-year-old Luann Carter Perry, sister of the deceased, expresses her thoughts on the accident and how she believes her siblings have been targeted during this investigation.
When Dwayne and Ellie called us from the airport and told us that they were coming over for a party, we were all so surprised, you know. They had just been in Norman 2 days before, so none of us had ever dreamed that they'd come home for the party with finals and all. Anyways, they weren't going to stay for the whole party because they rented an airplane and they wanted to be sure they got back on time. On the way out there, Dwayne was telling us that the weather was supposed to stay good for the rest of the night, and with the full moon it was going to be a really pretty flight. Oh, and one other thing, we got asked a bunch of questions about what Dwayne and Ellie ate and drank at the party that night. Well, I can tell you it sure wasn't any alcohol. No one in our family ever touches the stuff. But the investigators sure were persistent about it. Like they were looking for ways to blame Dwayne for causing the accident. Which they did anyways. They came out with their official accident report because all it said was pilot error. But that's just a bunch of bull. They never had any proof that Dwayne did anything wrong. He got a weather report just like he was supposed to. And it said the weather was okay. He called the controller just like he was supposed to. Instead of taking them to a place where they could land safely, the controller started steering them all over the sky, like Dwayne was some seasoned instrument pilot, which he wasn't and never claimed to be. That's why he lost control of the airplane. They were having him do all these things he wasn't trained for. And they got the nerve to call that pilot error. Controller error would be more like it. I suppose they're just scared we'll sue them for killing my brother and sister. And they did kill them. But they don't have to worry none. We ain't suing anybody. We just want to get this thing behind us and stop the hurt.
NASA representative Dr. Roberto Rapolito gives insight on the chain of events which led up to the crash.
The first real error in this accident was made by the flight service briefer. It was a mindset error. By that we mean the result of a presumption without basis that led to the casual misunderstanding. If that sounds like gobbledygook, let me explain what happened. Okay. When the pilot first called flight service, he was told that the available weather data was over an hour old and that a significant change in forecasts was in the process. He was also told to call back later for an update before taking off. Then the pilot asked for the readings anyways, so the briefer gave him the unabbreviated report of the current conditions, leaving out the usual warnings and precautions because he assumed that the pilot would be calling back. Of course, the pilot never did call back. And putting the pilot and the briefer together for that particular course at that particular moment was unlucky.
Then add the approaches, the approach controller's false presumption, a terrible turn in the weather, a surprised and unprepared pilot, and you have the formula for an unavoidable accident. Too many things went wrong. Too many people made mistakes. Too many minds were astray at the same time. Any one of the mistakes could have led to an accident, but our choice for most critical would go to the approach controller. There were actually two things that happened before because of what he did. First, the initial assurances given to the pilot that he didn't need the approach plates probably dissuaded him from declaring an emergency by giving him a false sense of well-being. After all, he was in the care of the understanding, helpful controller who seemed to be treating the situation very routinely. How could the pilot second-guess such comforting personal assistance? The second thing was the controller's final comments and instructions. Issued as they were just as the pilot was maneuvering away from the localizer at Westheimer, they came across as a barrage that rattled his cage, and at precisely the moment when it couldn't stand being rattled because the pilot was already contending with as much as he could handle. Seconds later, the pilot lost control for no apparent reason. Up to then, he had been flying competently and was exhibiting no sign of spatial orientation. That's all I have to say.
Several mistakes lined up perfectly to cause a major problem, which is the case of many aviation accidents. Humans do make bad judgment calls, but it's our job to learn from them in order to prevent similar incidents. We asked private pilot Tammy Wall about his view on the accident.
As a young pilot with similar experience as Dwayne, what would you have done differently in this situation?
I think what he did wrong was, first of all, was everything had to do with the weather. So I think he should have paid more attention to his weather briefing. When the weather briefer said that he should call back later, right before his flight, he should have called back and got an updated weather briefing. That was his first mistake, and I believe that would have changed everything for the flight. His second biggest mistake, I believe, that he should have been more careful with, is he shouldn't have proceeded into IMC conditions without actually telling the controller that he wasn't completely instrument rated. This would have made a huge difference in how they handled his situation, and he would have been treated with a lot more care and given easier instructions to follow, which probably would have saved his life.
What safety precautions could have been taken to prevent this from happening?
I don't think there are very many safety precautions that could have been implemented to prevent this accident, seeing as the number one reason for the accident was pilot error. One thing that could have been changed that may have altered the future of the pilot would be if the weather briefer did not give out information he knew to be false. So if they had some sort of regulation preventing weather briefers from giving information they thought would be inaccurate, that would definitely change the future of the flight.
In your opinion, did the prevailing forecast delivered to the pilot play a significant role in this accident?
The weather forecast played a huge role in the accident, as you can tell from my previous answers to the questions. If there was a different forecast, or if they had not given an inaccurate forecast, it would have changed the entire situation, and the pilot would not have gone for his flight.
For any young pilots watching, what advice would you give them if they were ever found themselves in a situation like this?
Well, first of all, I'd say that for the first thing, make sure you have a good weather brief. Understand what you're flying into and where you're going before you even take off. If you do find yourself approaching IMC conditions, make sure you either turn back, which would be your first choice, turn around so you don't get stuck in the conditions, or if you do just get stuck in instrument conditions, don't be afraid to declare an emergency. Don't have this charade where you think that you can do it on your own and you're safe because you have training. Just declare an emergency, and it's better safe than sorry.
It's better safe than sorry is a good motto to live by, Tammy. It's hard to place the blame on the air traffic controller or even the weather briefer, because ultimately it was pilot error. As pilots, we learn to not overlook the weather, because, as Mr. Thompson would say, Mother Nature is not always nice.